Only the fatalistic Chinese were willing to mix the explosives or use it. Often they went sky high. They chipped and drilled, scrambled up the lines while charges of gunpowder roared beneath them. Then they drilled again.
1866年的春天
In the spring of 1866, the project moved into the Sierra. The first stop was Cape Horn, a huge rock with the American River roaring from below. To dig a railroad on the cliffs, records indicate that the Chinese laborers lowered themselves in suspended bamboo baskets, beating and drilling the rocks with hammers while suspended and placing explosives inside the rocks.
掉下去，悬空用铁锤一点一滴的敲打，然后在岩壁中放置炸药。
One of the things that is very commonly told is about the Chinese hanging in baskets in the construction of the railroad around Cape Horn. It's a wonderful, compelling image, and I understand why people really love that idea. The problem is, it doesn't appear to have happened.
近年来，不断有关于 Cape
In recent years, there have been controversy over how railroads were built at Cape Horn. Some historians believe that the 70-degree angle at Cape Horn made it impossible to lower bamboo baskets. The swinging motion of the baskets would be too life-threatening. However, some Chinese scholars held different views.
Despite the fact that, we can certainly, Cape Horn was solid granite, right? Yeah. And how are you going to put a railroad bed, literally a bed 20 feet across, 24 feet across on part of the mountain? Mm. So you're still going to have a lower Chinese somewhere, set the dynamite charge, take it off, bigger hole, go back down, bigger hole, so enough you put a foothold for a crew down there, right?
打通了 Cape Horn.
Getting through Cape Horn, Crocker's army encountered another obstacle at Donner Pass.
唐纳隘口又碰上了另外一个挑战。Summit Tunnel 第6号隧道。
Summit Tunnel number 6 is the longest among the 15 tunnels in the Sierra. The terrain is made of granite. Imagine how the Chinese laborers chiseled through the rock by hand.
The Summit Tunnel is the crowning achievement, or one of the crowning achievements, for the Chinese in the construction of the railroad. They worked for well over a year, close to 2 years, drilling this tunnel, sometimes recording progress of only inches per day.
In order to excavate the 15 Donner tunnels totaling 1,600 feet, the Chinese worked rotated shifts days and nights. They did not have advanced machinery and they could not use black explosives on granites. They used nitroglycerin, a highly explosive substance, to blow off the granite. Residues scattered everywhere, which led to many casualties. Supervisor Strobridge lost an eye to explosions. This was the most difficult section for Central Pacific Railroad Company. Here, the Chinese laborers also passed 2 severely cold winters.
One of the most grueling experience was during the winter of 1866 and 1867. Extremely bad cold weather. Okay, and if you drive up into the Sierras during the winter, and you go skiing and having fun, yeah, but you think of the Chinese laborers in the winter, what they had to do. They worked through the night, even in different shifts, under the snow with with the snow sheds, and they just continue to work all winter long.
这些来自热带广东省的华工。
Imagine how difficult it was for these workers from Guangdong province to spend months working with their feet soaked under the snow. According to Dutch Flat Inquirer's report in 1866, avalanches buried many tents of the Chinese workers while they were asleep. It was never determined exactly how many Chinese laborers were killed during the railroad constructions.
I think two things. I think number one, my gut tells me it's probably high. But the other thing is my historical knowledge tells me nobody has any real solid idea of how many people were killed because nobody's done a systematic study that really looks at it because the evidence is so sparse. There's so little evidence. And I'm talking white workers as well as Chinese.
That there is one newspaper article talked about a shipment of 20,000 pounds of bones. I don't know if you came across that, from the railroad area to Sacramento, then to be sent back to China. So we know that at least at this high point, probably about 12 to 14,000 Chinese worked on the railroad. 20,000 pounds of bones probably amount to about 1,200 people. So at least a 10% loss of life. I'm sure there's more.
My gut also tells me that probably more workers working on the Union Pacific died than workers working on the Central Pacific.
Because?
And there's a couple of reasons for that. For one thing, the towns along the Union Pacific during construction were known as hell on wheels, full of gambling and drinking, and they were famous for the number of deaths per night of workers from fighting and things like that. The Central Pacific did not allow such towns to exist along their railroad during construction.
Compared to the Irish workers, the Chinese workers had better eating and living habits.
The food for the Chinese was quite good because the Chinese, first of all,
They cook for themselves.
they cook for themselves, and then they're not going to work eating meat and potatoes or beans, and they're not going to eat, pork and beans. They cannot. They will not. They wanted their own food, and also they boiled their water for tea. So they had no dysentery. The white workers on the Union Pacific coming from the east, they suffered such bouts of dysentery because they drank the water from the river. The Chinese always boiled their water.
After a day of work, the Chinese workers would clean their bodies. They carried tea and whiskey bottles. This habit saved them from catching infectious diseases.